This is the BBC.
Dear brothers and sisters, all are welcome here at the Confessions podcast, whether saint or sinner.
Hey, well, look. Hey, look, this is... Oh, stop coughing. This is a Confessions podcast from your friends at the BBC. Hello, young Matthew.
Hello.
Why do you put on a posh voice?
That was a very good... That was a very sort of 1930s...
Why do you do that?
I'm in vaudeville. Hello! Kind of voice.
And hello, Bobby Pryor.
Hello, I'm not in vaudeville.
Eh?
I'm not
But
in
you
vaudeville.
probably could be because you're a trained performer.
Well, many years have gone by.
When was the last time you were a performer?
Oh.
And what was your performance?
So my sister and I had an acrobatic act. Then she went and did aerials. So I had a low wire and a contortionist act and a balance and hoopers and glasses act.
I've seen you doing contortion.
I
have
haven't seen
not.
you do contortion.
Yes, you
See, it's
have.
funny,
Can
isn't
you
it?
get into a small box?
No. Is that a wishful thinking from you two? Come, Bobby, get in this cardboard box.
Can you bend over backwards?
No, I'm nearly 50.
Can you put your legs behind your head?
Okay, moving on now. What can you do? I'm not the only performer. Part of our team there is hula hooper.
Who's Producer Phil?
Producer Phil is a hula hooper. Yeah.
This has been kept quiet.
Have they not?
This
Did you
is-
not know?
No, I didn't know
Is
that
this
either.
anything to do with Celtic?
Oh, right. It's that.
Is that what it is? Anyway, this week's collection includes a proper confessions, you know. Includes Ian's confession from Russia with Love, Lindsay's misdemeanor, lipstick, powder and paint, Pete's sorry story, green pants of home, plus another tale we've unearthed from the confessions crypt. Another classic confession. First, we're going to start with Alan's confession, All You Bead Is Love.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast. Please be seated.
Dear Simon and the team, let me take you back to the 25th of May 1977. When Liverpool FC qualified for their first European Cup final in the eternal city of Rome. Being a lifelong fan, I decided to book a day flight to watch my team in this historic match against Borussia Mönchengladbach of Germany at the Olympic Stadium. I landed in Rome on the morning of the game and joined 25,000 other Reds who had made the arduous journey, many of them travelling overland by special train from Lime Street Station. As it was my first time in Rome, I decided, like many others, to visit the Vatican. Now, my nan was back at home and she's a devout Catholic and went to church every day. So I decided to buy her a nice set of Vatican rosary beads to take back to Liverpool when in Rome and all that. As I was walking back out of the Vatican, I need to apologise, by the way, there is an accent. There is an accent coming up, which is unavoidable because it is written in this style.
Oh, really?
Okay?
Great.
Go
It's
on, Ed.
either going to be Italian or Scouse. Here it comes.
It's not going to be Scouse. As I was walking back out of the Vatican, I spotted a priest standing in the main hall, and a thought struck me. Since I'm here, I might as well get the beads blessed for Nan while I'm in the Vatican, save for the trouble of doing it at our local church back in Liverpool. I approached the priest, held up the beads, and asked him very politely to bless them. "Ja," he says. "I would very much like and be very happy to do this for you," he replied. It turns out he was from Dusseldorf. Obviously, as you can tell.
Yes, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was over for the big match, and he duly did a short prayer over my beads and blessed them. On handing them back, though, he said, "I will not be praying for your team tonight, however."
Oh, it's a French at the end.
No.
However.
"I will not be praying for
Very
your
nice.
team tonight," he says, being a German priest.
Yes.
You sound like the vamp in Sesame Street.
Good. Well, there are worse things to sound like. Anyway, he's a priest from Dusseldorf, and he did the honours there, as they say. That's a bit of Catholic language. I smiled, thanked him, and thought no more of it, especially not after Liverpool won the game 3-1, and I was too busy celebrating anyway. I couldn't celebrate for too long, however, as I had to head back to Liverpool the same night. The next day, I told my dad the story, and he said something along the lines of, "For heaven's sake, don't tell your nan they've been blessed by a German. She'll throw an absolute fit." Well, I promised my dad that I wouldn't say a word of that to Nan, and vowed there and then to keep the story to myself. Different time.
Yeah.
A few days later, on Sunday morning, we all went round to Nan's after church, as we did every Sunday, and because this day was also her birthday, all of my uncles, aunts and cousins were there too. In front of everybody, I very proudly presented my gift to her, and she smiled, gave me a little peck on the cheek, and placed the rosary beads around her neck. Nan then said, "I'm going to Mass later, so I'll ask the Monsignor to bless them for me." And this is where it all started to go wrong. And for some unknown reason, I blurted out, "There's no need, Nan. They've already been blessed." Now, I tried to stop my sentence halfway through, but you know what it's like. It's too late. It's already out. "Oh, really? Who by?"
Oh, no.
says Nan. And in a blind panic, I said the very first thing which came into my head.
Yeah.
They were blessed by the Holy Father himself.
The Pope. Great. Yeah, of course he did. Yeah.
The room fell silent, and my Nan, who had by this time clasped the rosary beads firmly to her chest, stammered, You mean the Holy Father Pope Paul himself has touched these beads?" Her face had turned white by now, and she'd started to shake. The whole room by now was staring at me as if they knew I was telling porkies. My dad was glaring at me through clenched teeth, which is my favourite phrase.
Yeah. Doesn't work. But anyway.
It doesn't really, you get the idea of what he was doing. But I had no choice to carry on and tough it out. "Yes, Nan," I said. "He was walking past the crowd outside the Vatican. I held them up to him, asked him to bless them, and he took them off me and said Hail Mary and passed them back." Well, she started hyperventilating. It became clear we needed to calm her down, so we sent her for a lie down with a glass of sherry, which always works. When Nan recovered a little bit later, she promptly took off her pinny, put on her scarf, coat and brolly, then trundled off to her sister's around the corner in the pouring rain to show off her new souvenir to everyone who would listen. In fact, rumour has it that some women in the parochial club that evening actually fainted when my Nan regaled the story of the Holy Father and the Vatican beads. And to compound my embarrassment, the Monsignor told the tale again from the pulpit at Mass the next week,
Excellent.
much to the displeasure of my dad, who kicked me in the ankle under the pew. He prefers that to the peace anyway. You should have seen his face when my Nan got up and walked up and down the aisle to proudly show the beads off to the congregation, many of whom reached out just to touch the same beads. Following that, my dad stopped my pocket money for a month, and he made me put it into the church plate every Sunday as punishment. However, he never told my Nan the truth. No one told my Nan the truth, and she wore the beads every time she went to church for the rest of her life, and I'm sure it gave her great pleasure and great comfort. However, I do now belatedly beg forgiveness for misleading my lovely little Nana, along with the Monsignor and half the parishioners of St Dominic's in Huyton, Liverpool, in the process. Well, you know, Alan didn't mean to, and from the sound of it, it sounds as though Alan's Nan got a great lot of joy, even though it was based on a deception. So maybe there are no victims. I don't know. Let's see what Sister Bobby thinks.
Well, the thing is, of course, Alan, you did that lovely thing. You got a gift and you got it blessed. It's a double gift. That's really considerate of you. And actually, you're right. The deception wasn't yours. You didn't go out to deceive. And there is that moment when she said, "Oh," and how could you possibly take that away from your Nan? And I think surely all blessings are of equal value. Surely it doesn't really matter.
Point.
I don't know these things. Maybe someone could put me right, but it's a blessing. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. And she got to say so much joy from it. And how could you kind of mock her? You couldn't. The point was in the living room, you'd have had to destroy her lovely bit of joy. And from that point on, you just had to go with it. You are forgiven, Alan. I think given the circumstances, that was the best thing to do.
And the last Pope but one was German, so it could actually have been him.
Oh, yes. Could have been. Well, obviously everybody wins from this because Gran wins because she gets a rosary that's been blessed by the Pope. I mean, we don't know how this works, but I'm guessing, if it's been blessed by a priest, then line of succession
counts the same.
Command and control. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Command and control.
Yeah, it gets passed down to the bishops and the deacons, and I'm out of my depth. So I'm going to say, yes, I mean, that's fine. So she wins, and he wins, and Liverpool win 3-1, as I seem to remember, on the way to winning 4 other European Cups. Right. So everybody wins. Well done. Definitely forgiven.
The Confessions Podcast.
Father Simon and the Collective. Once upon a time, I was working in Russia. There was a beautiful Russian princess, and by some miracle, I persuaded her to accompany me on a trip from Moscow to St. Petersburg. It was a business trip, but I decided to make a long weekend of it, as I'd always wanted to explore the city. We decided to travel by overnight train, and had secured a cabin for the 2 of us. We boarded around 8 o'clock in the evening, and the train was due to arrive the following morning. When we got on board, the kind lady showed us to the cabin, provided us with the obligatory tea from the samovar, checked the tickets, and then explained that she would leave us in peace until the morning. The trip was stunning. It was the middle of winter, So there was snow and moonlight, and what with the scenery and the enticing rhythmic nature of the train journey, plus discussing the state of Russian politics.
Yes.
Maybe we didn't get as much sleep
No.
as we should have done.
Okay.
That would be distracting, wouldn't
Yes, it would.
So much to discuss, but look at
and
that snowy scenery.
Rhythmic nature of the train. Yeah.
More tea.
we spent the day trundling around St. Petersburg doing the usual touristy things, and then in the evening we decided to go to the Kirov to watch a ballet. Now, being from Yorkshire, going to the ballet when I was growing up was probably not on the list of usual Friday night activities, but I'd recently started going to the Bolshevik in Moscow, and I really, really enjoyed it. However, this particular ballet, Raymonda I think it was called, was dreadful, and I found about 10 minutes in I wasn't enjoying it at all. I managed to make it through to the interval. Here was where I made my first mistake. I decided to indulge in the traditional caviar on stale bread and a couple of glasses of the rather splendid champagne, and I may even possibly have sneaked a couple of extra glasses to fortify myself for the forthcoming dreariness of the second half.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's first and second half. I'm not sure that's how they...
Yes, it is. It's exactly how they call it, yeah.
Unfortunately, the auditorium was hot, and it was at this stage that the alcohol, the overnight lack of sleep due to cultural conversations, and the heat got to me, and I drifted off. I was enjoying a particularly pleasant dream involving a snow princess and cultural exchanges when it suddenly turned into a rugby line-out, and I was being tackled illegally by a spear tackle from an All Black. I woke with a start to realise it wasn't a rugby player injuring me, but my Russian princess slamming her elbow into my ribs to wake me up. Oi! That's how she talks.
Okay.
She then... It's a common Russian princess.
Yes, it is, yeah.
She then proceeded to explain loudly that I was an uncultured British peasant whose snoring had brought eternal shame on her and spoilt her evening at the ballet.
Yeah.
She also added some other words which brought applause from the surrounding crowd, who were enjoying this rather welcome addition to their evening's entertainment. We eventually made up and my ribs recovered within a few weeks. Then eventually we moved to the UK together. Now, I'm frequently reminded of by my Russian princess of my previous shame. In fact, for the past 15 years or so, she has repeated this story with great enjoyment to all our friends, all our acquaintances, and even passing traffic wardens. However, what she doesn't know is that on one occasion, when I think she had consumed a little too much tonic water, I overheard her telling a friend that the real reason she was upset at the incident was that my snoring had actually woken her up. And to cover her embarrassment at falling asleep, she had decided to deflect attention by blaming me. Well, do I seek absolution from the masters and mistresses of mercy? Yes, but not for my snoring, although I fully accept that the frequency and volume was offensive, and not for disturbing the audience, for they enjoyed the way I had inadvertently livened up a fairly dull evening. In fact, I don't seek forgiveness at all for anything I have done, but I am seeking forgiveness for something I am about to do.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
How about this?
Okay.
A little bit of Philip K. Dick. This is what this is.
Yeah.
You see, I have devised a cunning plan to avenge 15 years of humiliation from my Russian princess, but obviously I'm not going to say exactly what I've got in store. This means that she'll not be able to pass through a doorway without checking for a bucket of ice-cold water overhead, and she will suspect the provenance of every meal I make for her. Alternatively, I may never do anything, but she will live in fear forever, and this confession itself may in fact be my revenge. She's a keen listener to this particular part of your show, so her knowing that you have pardoned me in advance, hopefully, for whatever heinous revenge I have planned, will add to the anticipation. Alternatively, she may just wake me up in the middle of the night with another rib buster and explain that if I ever wish to continue our cultural conversations in this life or the next, I should cease and desist from any talk of vengeance. Toe rag.
Another Russian phrase.
That's a St. Petersburg expression.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I quite like... So this is very good. So Ian wants forgiveness because clearly he fell asleep at the ballet. Understandable, I suppose, under the circumstances. He'd had a cultural exchange and he'd had a glass of champagne. However, he wants forgiveness, Bobby, for something he's about to do, which is the kind of thinly veiled threat for his Russian princess. What do you say?
Well, before we get to that bit, first of all, Ian, I thought you were James Bond. I thought, wow,
He might
man
be.
from Yorkshire, James. Yeah, but then he wasn't, was he? Because he stuffed it all up by falling asleep in the ballet. James Bond doesn't fall asleep in
No.
the ballet. He might, do other things, but he wouldn't fall asleep. He'd be,
probably right.
he might be busy with work or something. But I'm really impressed here that you managed to get a Russian princess.
He's always busy with work.
Yeah.
With
You're
work.
busy again, James.
Well, but you managed to get one of this amazing women to come back with you to the UK and still be with you for 15 years. But I'm not going to forgive you for something that you might do to her. I don't think you can threaten this lovely woman, for eternity.
My guess is when he says this confession itself might be, in fact, my act of revenge, I suspect that that's what he means. And he wouldn't commit any of these terrible things in the future. But who knows, Brother Matthew?
Well, snoring in the ballet, we've all done that, or at least wished we could have done. It's not really my thing. Everyone else loves it. But by the way, isn't it? It's the Bolshoi ballet, isn't it? It's not the Bolshevik ballet.
just
It's a
saying-
whole different thing, I think that is.
He said he was going to the Bolshevik
The Bolshevik ballet?
in Moscow.
I'm going to say no. So I think here he's wanting forgiveness for being a prankster in advance, and I've made my feelings very clear on pranksters, frankly. So
the Bolshevik might be a pub.
The Bolshevik pub ballet.
Yeah, I'll just
What?
go down.
Going down the Bolshevik.
See down the Bolshevik, mate.
See, oh, they're doing the ballet again. Lovely. And they're all sounding like that again. So I am not going to forgive because of the whole prankster thing. Not up for that at
Get us
all.
a couple of pints of
Yeah.
green Trotsky ale, will you, while you're there?
Green Trotsky.
No?
No.
All right.
Bolshevik ballet.
What did you say?
Bolshevik.
Forgiveness or not?
I said not forgive.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast.
Thanks to Ian for that sinful tale. Still to come, we get a visit from this guy. So where did you put my clothes then? Explain this then. I put a white load in the machine, comes out green. What's going on? I mean, that could be anybody.
It is your go-to voice.
Only occasionally. Only occasionally. Anyway, that's coming up. So Parish notice board time. This is
Good.
Matt's
Yes,
favourite
here we
part of
go.
the show. The confessions they tried to ban.
And did, in
and
fact,
actually
ban.
And actually did. Which is why we just mention them now en passant,
Oh, very good.
What does that actually mean?
in passing.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Thank
I think it's a chess
Is it?
term. I think it's if you're in...
It is,
It's
yeah.
pawns in the middle of the board and you can...
Prawn, yeah, as
And
opposed
you-
to prawn.
Well,
Go
not
on.
prawn, obviously. And you... Can you move diagonal? Do you
No,
move,
no, it's
you
when
move
they-
straight on and you
Yeah.
take anyway.
Yes,
Each one teach one, that's what I say.
yes.
Whatever. The confession from Katie the teacher about meeting one of her pupils' mothers on her way to get her hangover cure. Let's just say the mum was expecting conversation to come out of Katie's mouth.
Oh, those ones never get on. Oh, there's so few of them that get on.
Not what actually did emerge. Calvin, your confession about accidentally revealing your sister-in-law's tattoo to her parents might have got through, but the way you found out about it
Oh, right.
is just not on.
No, it's not.
And quite frankly, will not be condoned in this parish. So that whole story got a little bit weird, Calvin. Anyway, now obviously we do get a few disgusting tales, but Rachel's has actually been banned on the grounds of health and safety. So let's just say we don't condone jumping from a moving train as it's leaving the platform in any circumstances
No.
because it makes you a loser.
Well, yes.
With an L there in front of
Indeed,
your head.
yes.
So you obviously can't do that. Fair play to Nurse Jessica, who actually realised her confession was too rude for the programme, so she told us she wouldn't waste her time by sending it all. However, she did say it involved putting a patient's false leg on back to front
Oh, what's wrong with that? That's okay.
and cleaning the whole hospital ward's false teeth all together in one bowl.
Right, okay, that's
Amongst
that's not on. The
others.
false leg, though, that's
Just
fine.
to be clear, none of those are okay. Send in a much better confession to confessions
Do them in a job lot. Why take the time with the false teeth?
bbc.co.uk. Right, from the podcast post bag, which is not a genuine thing, but, it's very, very useful. Some of the highlights this week. Linda Hudspeth in Bishop Stortford. I wonder if you might be able to include in your podcast the confession about the rugby club Beano involving false teeth going overboard during a sea fishing trip. This was the first confession I ever heard on your show, and it had me hooked, if you'll pardon the pun. It made me laugh out loud. We'll add that to the list, Linda. Gilly Beaton says, now you're digging back into the archives, I must request the confession about a grandpa who was away on holiday at the seaside with his grandson, told him a funny story about the wind turbines and I think the secret police. Actually, and there was what? Do you remember the one where a family made up a story to? I think it was a father made up a story to his young daughter. This is all coming back to me now.
Okay.
She's like 5, and they're going over a bridge, and she says, and he makes up a story about her sister going missing and being disappearing because a troll took her from the bridge, and just did it as a passing joke. And a year later, she says, "Whatever happened to my sister?" And she'd been carrying it around for an entire year, thinking that a troll had actually taken.
That one got very dark, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
As indeed did that little memory. Just be careful what you tell your kids.
Yeah.
Sebastian, can you play the one with the prosthetic leg and the bumps?
Oh, yes! That was very good.
It's just giving a fellow office worker the bumps and its prosthetic leg.
Getting off.
But it was all done deliberately, and he had agreed.
Yes.
We'll look for that. Louis Billington, please play the one I heard about the man who was naked in hotel reception.
Oh.
Fell asleep on the chaise longue and then woke up when everyone was coming down for breakfast. We'll do that. We've also had our first Christmas confession request. Ben Lewis says, pretty please, can we have my favourite and most shocking confession of all, the man who stole the old woman's Christmas turkey. What a classic that was. Some general correspondence is DJA771, which makes you sound like a robot. And maybe you are. Every night at 5:40, I have to pull over the car as I am at risk to other road users as a result of your confession. For those 10 minutes, my attention is nowhere near the road. Still laughing now at several of them. Thanks, Robot DJ. And Stuart on Facebook, does anyone else find the best part of confessions is when Matt and Bobby are wetting themselves? Because Matt's got the best laugh ever.
It's not actually happened, though, is it?
No.
Have you ever,
happy to report.
Have you ever had an accident?
No. Dry as a bone. Very, very happy to report.
It's got a confession, a request. Confessions at BBC.co.uk.
There's a broadcasting career high
Here we
point.
go again. Okay.
I wish I hadn't asked that.
Back to this week's confessions. We've got Lindsay's misdemeanor. This is lipstick, powder and paint.
The Confessions Podcast.
Dear Simon, it's slightly boring at the beginning, a bit perfunctory. Doesn't even acknowledge that the rest of you guys are here, which I'm afraid is going to count against you,
Oh, dear.
Lindsay, probably. Anyway, dear Simon, I'm writing to request forgiveness for an incident that occurred more than 40 years ago when my big sister Wendy was 10, I was 8, and my little sister Sammy was 6. 1972 was a more innocent time. What?
Okay, yeah, we know where this is going. Yeah.
When us girls had a pocket money day on Fridays, and we were given 5p to buy a quarter of sweets from the corner shop. Our weekly and greatly looked forward to treat. Children in those days went to play on their bikes and roller skates out in the street. Small girls didn't wear crop tops or miniskirts and were certainly not encouraged by their mothers to attend discos and certainly not wear makeup. So it's with this backdrop that I tell you my shameful tale. Every morning my mother would put on her makeup in the bathroom mirror, and we would watch this ritual with envy. Not a smudge of lipstick or a dab of cream were we allowed, but the most coveted of all of the makeup paraphernalia was the beautiful big fluffy powder puff, which was kept in a round and lovely box with a picture of a beautiful, glamorous and happy lady puffing her nose with said powder puff. We would ask our mother if we could at least have a single puff of this on our perfect children's skins, but she said no. It was to no avail. Did she care? No, she didn't. We wanted the powder, but she said no. One Saturday morning, I woke up early to use the bathroom. I was washing my hands when I looked up to the mirror, and it suddenly occurred to me that this was my chance. I could try out the powder puff whilst Mummy was still in bed, and quickly return to my bedroom, and nobody would be any the wiser. With pounding heart, I clambered up to the special glass tray under the mirror on which the powder puff box was kept. Carefully, I lifted up the box, and there it was. The beautiful, fluffy puff felt soft and silky in my hands as I dabbed it in the face powder. I lifted it to my face and puffed it on my nose, and then, unfortunately for me, I sneezed, because I wasn't used to this kind of thing. Now, it might be a good time to tell you that the makeup mirror and glass tray was, of course, at an adult size height, and I had in fact clambered onto the toilet in order to reach. In my haste and excitement, I hadn't closed the toilet lid and was now balancing either side of the toilet seat.
Here we go.
As I sneezed, the powder puff fell out of my hands and landed straight in the toilet bowl.
Oh, dear.
In horror, I clambered down to retrieve it, but alas, the once beautiful and fluffy powder puff was now a wet and grey-looking limp rag. In a panic now and not knowing what to do, I hurriedly clambered back onto the toilet seat, stuffed the now sopping rag back into the box, ran into bed as quickly as I could, and actually went back to sleep. Later that morning, we all sat at the breakfast table, and I had in fact forgotten all about what had happened. I was just tucking into my cornflakes. We suddenly heard a loud scream from the bathroom. My mother suddenly appeared at the dining room. It all came flooding back to me. She was holding the sodden rag in one hand and the powder puff box in the other. My sisters looked blankly. I also tried to appear as nonplussed as they did. Who's done this? My mother intoned as Terry Jones in a dark and angry voice. Who's done this? She said in her dark and angry voice. She used only for specially serious occasions. It's true, parents have serious telling off voice, and clearly this is the one that's being used. We all looked at each other, and then at the breakfast table, my sisters in bewilderment, I with a guilty red face. I know it was one of you. I want to know what happened.
This is a completely different voice.
Completely different woman has just arrived. This is still my mother.
It's a stunt double.
I want to know which one of you it was.
Is this from Gas and
To know
Gators
what
again?
happened. Still a silence. Nobody made eye contact. We're all looking at each other. How is this going to end? I need to know, and I need to know now. This is getting serious bad. With that, my mother played her trump card. If none of you girls own up to this,
What on earth?
there will... Quiet. Quiet! There will be no pocket money on Friday. My sisters looked horrified at this point, so my mum repeated, no pocket money on Friday. And you know what that means? It means no sweets. What does no pocket money mean? It means no sweets. That's what it means.
No Saturday spends. We had it on Saturday.
There was an angry quiet, please. In the middle. There was an angry protest from my older sister whilst I was inwardly panicking. What to do? Then suddenly, my little sister pipes up. It was me, Mummy. I'm ever so sorry. And with that, she burst into tears. The thought of no sweets had clearly been too much for her. And I'm ashamed to say that I did not own up to the truth, and in all these years I have never disclosed to anyone that the true origin of this awful crime was me, and it was not my little sister, who I think you remember is Sammy
Sammy,
age
little
6.
sister.
Well, only been taking notes, Nigel. That's very good. Thank you. So I really need forgiveness here, not from my mother, who should have allowed us to use her powder puff. What's the point of having a powder puff if you don't share it with your daughters? And anyway, she had lovely skin. But from my little sister, who instead of going out to play that lovely Saturday morning, had to sit in her bedroom and, quote, think about what she had done.
Yeah.
That classic
Yes,
parental
brilliant.
line.
Well done.
You need to go to your room and think about
Think
what
about
you've done.
it. Yeah.
Is that what you've got? Really? I've just got to think about what I've done. All right, then I'll go and do that. I'm truly sorry. In my defence, if Sammy hadn't owned up, I hope I would have done so, says Lindsay. I don't think so, Lindsay, because you had the moment when little sister, age 6, says, it's me. I think that was the point. You say, no. I'll take the rap. That's not the way it went, and this has been hanging around in this household ever since 1972. What'd you say, Bobby?
How gorgeous is Sammy? It was me. The thought of having no sweets for everybody. I hope that what you did is you gave her your sweet ration, or at least half.
This is almost like a pause for thought.
This is not on. I don't, because I think she sounds absolutely gorgeous, and the fact that she took the brunt of this. I wonder whether she herself had kind of been playing with it as well at some point.
That's true.
You
Maybe
just,
she
you know,
had
maybe
been.
she had. So maybe she thought she was part of it. But I think good on you, Sammy, for owning up. Lindsay, you are not forgiven.
Maybe Sammy was guilty. Anyway, what do you think, novice?
I think the likelihood of them both dropping it into the Vakazi was unlikely, but I do think Sammy, she fell on a sharpened licorice torpedo and took the hit, didn't she? I just thought, it did take me back. Saturday Spends, Mr. Chadwick's, that's what we used to go on our bicycles.
It's not about you, Nigel.
No, okay.
What did you buy with your 5p?
Oh, licorice, Pontefract cakes, licorice torpedo. But Mum used to spray hairspray, and I used to watch it on her hair, and then she smoked Turkish cigarettes, very dangerous for combination. Because of that lovely memory, I wasn't going to forgive you, Lindsay, but you've taken me back to watch my mum spray her hair. So forgiven.
Turkish cigarettes.
Yes, I
How
do.
did we get onto that?
Turkish cigarettes and
Contact
hairspray.
that
So
and
you
hairspray.
So she wouldn't let you borrow a hairspray, but she...
No.
Then, can I have a drag of your fag, Mum?
I should be 6'2". My dad, he used to put his cigarette ends in an ornamental pipe and let me smoke them.
Dear me.
Unbelievable.
None of this at
Different
home.
times,
It's
unbelievable.
very, very
They were.
different times. Matthew.
I believe that Sammy, although Sammy has very much taken the moral high ground, there's no doubt lords it over everyone else, saying, remember that time when it wasn't my fault, but I think definitely Sammy was involved somewhere. I detect a hint of guilt in the, yes, it was me, I'm going to room to think about what I could have done, and all of this collective punishment, not buying that at all. Gone through everyone else, Sammy, but not through me. So I am definitely going to forgive because something fishy's going on with Sammy in the powder pot.
This is the place where penitents seek our pardon for their sins. Simon Mayo's Confessions Podcast.
Pastor Simon and the deaconate of the Free Church of Radio 2. That's you guys. I'm using guys generically
Yeah.
in a balanced sense. My confession takes us back to the late 80s when I was a student and when my limited budget for accommodation gave me very few options. The only place I could find in my price bracket was described as a room to rent in a house of motorbike riders.
Oh,
Anyway, as a biker myself, I thought I'd give it a go.
yeah, sounds like heaven.
But whilst these guys were indeed bikers with motorbikes that made my Suzuki 250 look like a toy in comparison, their house was actually immaculate, and they had strict house rules that had to be followed. If you failed to abide by the rules, then you faced the wrath of a severe shouting at, extreme public ridicule, and even eviction. And two of the rules applied to the use of the washing machine. Rule 1, thou shalt not leave wet washing in the washing machine. Rule 2, thou shalt always leave the washing machine door and drawer open when the machine is not in use. Is everything clear? I think it is. Now, I originated, Father Simon, from the Midlands, where everyone either worked at Cadbury's or the Rover factory. So that's obviously a sweeping generalisation.
Because not everyone did.
In different times.
Yeah.
So my student belongings were either freebies depicting chocolate bars or cars. One such treasured possession was a racing green T-shirt stating, I drive a Triumph Acclaim, in gold letters. Truth be told, I'd never even been a passenger of such a car, let alone sat behind the wheel, but it was a great T-shirt because of its thickness, making it warm to wear under my bike leathers. Now, on the day before my sin was committed, I realised that the aforementioned T-shirt was becoming a bit whiffy, so I decided that the time had come for its biannual wash. It was duly washed in the sink. My mother insisted I always hand-wash this item, but I struck upon the idea of using the machine's rinse cycle to get all the water out. However, it wasn't until the next day that I suddenly remembered I hadn't retrieved my shirt, thereby breaking washing machine rule number 1, don't leave clothes inside. As I dashed to the kitchen, I saw that the washing machine rule 2 had been followed, meaning that someone had opened the door and drawer after the most recent wash. I poked my head inside, hoping that my T-shirt was still in there, but the machine was empty. As I slowly stood up, my eyes came level with a washing basket on the counter, which was full of someone else's washing, and it was damp, indicating it had been in the washing machine already. It had also had a disproportionate amount of items that were, to be honest, lime green. The sick feeling that I had felt at the thought of breaking washing machine rule number 1 suddenly intensified as I realised that this was someone else's white wash, and in amongst it must be my dark green T-shirt.
Oh, no.
I rummaged around, and sure enough, there was a racing green coloured ball of material in amongst the suit shirts and other expensive items that had once been gleaming white. I realised in an instant that someone had put their white load in, not realising that my green shirt was still in the machine. What was I to do? Should I confess to one of the bikers that I had destroyed their entire collection of white clothes? A moment of guilt was quickly replaced by a natural instinct to basically live to see another day. So I grabbed my shirt, dashed to my room, and I hid. It wasn't long before the other members of the house returned from their respective workplaces. Each went to their room, and then I heard one make his way down to the kitchen. He was one of the biggest of the lot, and the one that I was most scared of. I heard him clattering around the kitchen before shouting through the house, anyone seen my washing? Because actually he was from the BFG.
Yes.
Who's got my washing? One of the others came down. Oh, so it was you who left their washing in the machine. Well, don't worry, I got it out for you. That was the gist of what was said. After a lengthy one-sided discussion about the point of rules and the importance of keeping to them, and after the guilty party had apologised and solemnly promised never to do it again, he asked, "So where did you put my clothes then?" "Well, they're in front of you, you silly person," was the essence of the reply. "Those aren't mine. I'd washed all my white shirts for work, and they're all green." Then came the realisation that they actually were his clothes, and it was just that they had that mushy pea look to them, that green slime appearance that had fooled him. As his words got louder, and I'm afraid to say swearier, I thought hiding in my room might give away my guilt, so a minute later I casually walked down with an airy manner into the kitchen as if I hadn't heard anything. "Hi, everyone." Upon seeing me enter the room and knowing that I was the scientist amongst them, the biggest biker turned to me and said, "Explain this then. I put a white load in the machine, comes out green. What's going on?" "Well," I said scientifically, "you must have put something in the wash that was green, and the colour has run." He looked at me incredulously and then slowly and carefully said, "It was a white load. Everything was white when it went in. Everything was green when it came out." As he rummaged through his washing, he suddenly stumbled upon a pair of underpants that had a green square on them, no bigger than an average little fingernail, like a designer thing. "Well, that's the only thing in the wash that's green. There's your culprit." I said, "There it is." The big biker looked at me, suddenly unsure of himself. "You're telling me this little green square has turned my entire collection of white clothing, all my pants, socks and shirts bright green?" "Well, obviously," I concluded with an air of confidence. "What else could have done such a thing? You should always wash colours separately to whites. That's the rule." But they were white pants.
Yes.
"Yes," I said in a serious voice, "but with a green square. That makes it a coloured wash." "What does it make?" "It makes it a coloured wash." I retreated to my room and left him staring at his new collection of emerald green apparel. My green T-shirt, meanwhile, was wrapped in several bags and pushed down to the bottom of the bin, never to see the light of day again. Pastor Simon and the deaconate, I seek forgiveness, but not from the large biker, but rather from any subsequent partner that he went on to have. They would have undoubtedly had many arguments in the utility room as to what constitutes being a white load and a coloured load to this very day, and for that unnecessary angst, I apologise. Well, he wasn't very bright, was he? If he thought that, a tiny little square of green felt or a designer label was going to dye the whole wash green. Still, Pete's pretty smart, and he got away with it. Sister Bobby.
No. We're assuming these are biker boys, not biker girls, aren't we?
I think they are all. It did say right at the beginning.
Boys?
Well, it just say motorbike riders.
Could be girls.
But whilst these guys were indeed, maybe.
Who knows? Anyway, but I think it's not fair to blame the biker and his little square on his pants, because it's not fair. You ruined his washing, and it was actually really simple. Had you gone out to the shops, you could have got that stuff that catches the dye back. You could have put it on a wash and tried, and then you could have said, look, maybe a kind of, a bleach wash might
Matt's
fix
looking
it.
at you as though you're speaking in German.
There's a special thing that you can put in and it
Really?
catches the dye. Yes,
Good.
so if you put a whitewash in, put this stuff in. I can't remember. It's only one brand that does it, and then it'll catch all the dye and make everything usually white again. It's 99% successful.
Is that bleach?
No, that's different. And then if that doesn't work, then you do the. I don't want to advise on washing because I'm not a scientist. We need to get a specialist in. Pete, you could have saved this. You should have owned up. I always think if you do some damage, then if you own up and say, look, this is my fault. I've done this to fix it, and I'm going to do this. More respect.
Do you think?
You don't
I think
mess
he
with
might,
the biker's
I think
clothes.
you might have paid the price for that.
Pete, you're unforgiven.
Brother Matthew.
This sounds like my kind of house. I do love a house where there are rules. Do not leave your washing in the washing machine. I'm not sure what the idea is with leaving the doors open. That seems ridiculous.
Well, I
want to close the doors all the time.
Yeah.
And the drawers. What's that about? It's only going to hit me as I walk past. Anyway, that's not what the point. The point here is this speaks to a greater truth, is that none of us really understand washing or indeed sorting out whites. No, none of us get it. We all think we do, but we don't actually. Is that a white? I don't know. is a t-shirt, probably. But if has it got a bit of colour on it? Well, it has. Well, it's not a white then. But it's mostly white. Well, none of us.
You're
understand.
listening to a baffled man, ladies and gentlemen.
None of us understand. So that is why one can only forgive.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast.
Pete's sorry story, green pants of home, which concludes this week's batch of confessions. So let us know if you have a confession, maybe provoked by one of those. We know you got one. confessions@bbc.co.uk. So before we leave you, it's another classic confession. On the subject of last week's classic tale, the wedding confession from Radio 1 Days with the Guy Under the Bed.
Okay.
Simon, can't thank you enough for including the classic Better Make It 3 wedding confession in last week's podcast. Since it first aired, I've recounted that story to many people, but with the extra detail that I'd heard it originally whilst in stationary traffic. As you delivered the punchline, not only had I laughed out loud and thumped the steering wheel with glee, but I'd spotted in my rearview mirror the man in the car behind behaving in a similar way from which I could only deduce he was listening too. I'm happy to report that on rehearing the confession again, I once again laughed out loud and hope that others who remembered it felt similarly nostalgic. But thanks to whoever it was who requested it some 20 years or so on. So thanks for that. And this week's archive confession then has been discussed for a while. Took us a while to find it. Big mention to Tony and Matthew, who gave us some very helpful clues. It is the confession with the enormous baby.
Oh, superb! I love this one.
The Confessions podcast.
Dear Simon and team, my confession takes me back to one morning a couple of years ago when some friends called Jim and Jane asked if we could do them a rather large favour. They needed someone to look after their beloved baby daughter, Jessie. I say large favour as the baby was in fact large. Very, very large, huge. In fact, a giant baby. Having children of our own, we were seemingly a safe choice to look after this child for a few hours.
Pull yourself together, Mr. Mayo, right now.
Even our own children were delighted by this new experience, as in our family this child was legendary as being the biggest baby in history.
This is going to be good.
The allotted time came, and the young lady was dropped off at our home along with a large bag containing the necessary accessories. It's not that funny yet, is it really? And several heavy packs of baby.
Would you like somebody to take over? Are you all right?
This is like a cartoon image I've got.
You see, now he'll do it perfectly now.
She was a grizzly baby and proved difficult to comfort. We all took turns to entertain her, but all of our efforts were met with surly disapproval. Imagine our delight when the infant broke into a large grin and the sobbing stopped. To our surprise, her little eyes were fixed firmly on our beloved household pet, Rover the dog. I think we probably needlessly changed the name of the dog here. So the dog is going to be called Rover for the purpose of the story. Now, Rover was experienced in entertaining young folk and had taken a hand, or paw maybe, in raising our own children. So we were relieved that at last something had been found to distract Jessie the monster from her misery. As responsible adults, we were of course supervising the baby carefully around the dog, although more for the dog's sake, as one blow from the mighty baby hands could have caused the most damage.
What was Rover? Was he one of those little lap dogs? Little hamster things?
Don't know, really. We were disappointed that that's true, actually. The dog could have been smaller than the monster baby. We were disappointed that the happy giggles were again replaced by wails and sobs when Rover left his basket and approached our guest to extend the paw of friendship, but we assumed the baby was just a little nervous of meeting her first dog. Rover was sent back to his basket and the child again focused on him and showed much pleasure, clapping her pudgy hands in joy and wriggling frantically on my knee. Rover was once again beckoned over, but again the tears returned. In a confused state, we now relegated Rover to the garden and continued to try to please our high-maintenance guest. Following a somewhat challenging nappy change due to the vastness of the thighs.
It's just hilarious. Changing nappies.
No, it was the vast thighs that got me. Baby Jessie.
Oh, I'd like to apologise, listeners. This could go on and on for some time.
Yeah, was placed on a soft blanket, I do apologise, on the floor to allow a moment for the circulation to return to my legs.
I think he's laying an egg.
Stop it now.
I'm not doing anything. I think he can't carry on.
No, I'm going to carry on.
Are you?
I can't
Come on. He's actually crying. Come on, big breaths.
It ends sadly as well. A little determined crawling began, and safe in the knowledge that every possible danger had carefully been removed to accommodate our guest, and vastly relieved that she finally seemed happy, I began to do a little tidying up. Poor old Rover was sitting in the garden, gazing wistfully in at us through the patio window. His brown eyes seemed to brim with sadness, and a paw reached out to beckon me. A low whine escaped him, and his entire doggy being seemed fraught with misery. He seemed to be looking from me to something in the room behind me, and I suddenly realised this might be an unlikely lassie moment, and turned in an attempt to work out what this message was meant to be. Baby Jessie was no longer on the floor where I had left her, and after a moment's panic was relieved when I spotted her in Rover's doggy bed. However, the cause of Rover's distress and the cause of Jessie's earlier interest in him now became obvious. Several weeks ago, my husband had been seized by a sudden impulse to treat our beloved dog and had purchased a very large meaty hoof from the local pet shop. A whole hoof. It had soon looked past its best and even a little green, but as it seemed to give great pleasure to our hound, it was allowed begrudgingly to stay for him to munch on. This hoof was now grasped in Jessie's podgy hands as she sucked upon it happily, clearly delighted with this tasty new treat. With a push and a shove, Jessie could get most of the hoof in her mouth at once, though this necessitated breathing through her nose. Needless to say, I promptly recovered the offending hoof, and I'd like to add that no ill effects were ever felt by the child, thanks no doubt to its cast-iron constitution. I seek forgiveness not so much for allowing a friend's child to snack upon animal byproducts, but for the distress caused to our much-loved family pet who had to watch through the glass as his much-loved hoof was defiled by another. I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive. Very best wishes from Lorna. Anyway, got there in the end. That was an ordeal. Okay, Sister Rebecca.
My favourite line in this tale was the fact that Rover had had a hand in raising our children.
Yes.
What does that tell you about Lorna?
Yeah, well,
I think
true.
it was a great tale, wonderfully written. I think most babies have eaten a lot worse than hooves.
What, a whole hoof?
Well, you know, she was only sucking on it. It's fine. You know, germs are good, aren't they, for babies?
It was a manky old hoof?
I think it's absolutely fine. No harm done. And I think, Lorna, your tale was so hilariously written, you're more than forgiven.
Mother superior.
We used to call babies like that Bonnie, didn't we? A Bonnie baby meant a fat baby. Are you all right, by the way, Simon?
I'm okay, thanks.
You should stop holding your sides like that. Yeah, I mean, it was a very one of our funniest, I think.
When I got to page 2, I genuinely couldn't see.
No, because you were crying. Yeah, we noticed. I just think that, I mean, it's just such a funny story, and you know, the fact that she was sucking or eating a hoof,
Just sucking the hoof.
sucking a hoof. I think probably she had no ill effects.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure who needs to be forgiven, because I think, Lorna, I would definitely forgive you.
I mean, the owner of the hoof presumably is the only one who's upset.
Well, he was dead anyway.
Presumably, yeah, brother.
I think you're pretty much guaranteed to get completely forgiven by everyone when you do a story as funny as that. I've certainly done myself an injury listening to that. It was superb. We want more giant baby confessions. Any confessions involving huge babies and their massive thighs. Yes, please. Forgiven.
Simon Mayo's Confessions Podcast.
So that was your classic confession, your confession from the crypt this week. Nice to hear Rebecca back on that, and Sally Traffic.
Oh, yes.
On there. What was it about the phrase vast thighs, do you think? You got it again?
Yes.
I think it's down to your imagination.
It's just very funny. Fat baby, very funny. What's not funny about that? Fat baby.
It's
There
the
you
fat
go.
thighs.
And the thighs.
Confessions at bbc.co.uk. Sister Bobby, you only forgave one person this week.
Yeah, I'm getting tough again. I think winter's coming.
Has
and
it been a
I'm
bad
feeling
week? Matt, you forgave 3.
Yes.
What a soft pushover you
Well,
are.
I think, let he who has not done that cast the first stone.
glass houses and all that.
Is he? Yeah, quite right.
What?
Yes.
Anyway, if you made it to the end of the last podcast, you had to tweet utter clerical dismay. And loads of people have been doing that. Susie, Tracy, Sam, Astrid, Kirsty, and loads more. Thank you. This week's code phrase is... And then I had a Turkish cigarette. quite where Nigel thinks of these things. Well, he doesn't think, does he?
I took a gulp of water as he said those words, and it almost all came out.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might have noticed we're never quite sure what Nigel is about to say
Yeah.
next. Hence the charm. Don't forget you can hear the entire radio show with added music every weekday from 5 on BBC Radio 2. Thank you for downloading us and no one else. Please don't download any others because we'll feel betrayed.
Yes, we will take it
And we're
personally.
quite needy.
The Confessions Podcast. Go in peace.